In Borneo's rainforests, an ant has evolved one of the most extreme defensive strategies in nature. When threatened, it throws itself at its enemy, and then tenses all the muscles in its abdomen with such intensity that its body bursts, and it dies in a spray of bright yellow toxic goo. The ant is called Colobopsis explodens, and as its name suggests, it explodes. This is not an exaggeration. The miner worker of the small Southeast Asian ant species rips themselves open to defend their colonies, showering opponents in a sticky chemical cocktail. The ant lives in the lowland forests of Borneo, Thailand, and Malaysia. Its relatives had been known for some time, but this specific ant species wasn't described until 2018, having been discovered by a team of biologists sometime between 2014 and 2016. The extreme self-sacrificial defense of some Southeast Asian ants was first noted in 1916, but it wasn't until 1974 that biologists described the mechanism of self-rupture that ants used on their own gasters to release toxins. Workers of Colobopsis explodens are small, reddish insects the size of a grain of rice. There are 3 basic castes in the colony: the numerous miner workers that do most of the foraging and defense, the larger and rarer major workers, sometimes called soldiers, and the winged reproductives, both queens and males. The miner workers are quick, built for darting along twigs and bark. The soldiers are heavier, with distinctively shaped heads. The genus name Colobopsis means truncated, reflecting another of the genus's obvious traits. The soldiers have flattened, disc-shaped faces that they can use to block the nest entrance. In species across the genus, soldiers sit with their heads pressed into the nest openings as doors, denying entry to intruders. Major workers of Colobopsis explodens, consistent with the strategy, are almost never seen outside the nest, and their role appears to be largely defensive and domestic. The nests themselves are carved into trees. A single colony may occupy multiple nests spread across several neighboring trees, connected by long trails of foraging workers moving up and down the trunks. Colonies of Colobopsis explodens also tend to have more than one reproductive queen. The result is a sprawling, decentralized society, a federation of ants. Researchers who set up artificial nests found that the number of miner workers entering and leaving the nest stayed balanced throughout the day. Workers poured out to forage and poured back in with food, but the population inside the nest remained constant. What regulations, likely pheromones, keeping the colony's population steady remains unknown. At the entrance of nests, guard ants stand near the opening and touch every ant that passes with their antennae. These inspections are how ants identify members of their own colony. Miner workers are the ones that leave the nest to forage or graze. Grazing, in this case, refers to the constant collection of mosses, lichens, algae, and fungi that coat the tropical tree trunks. What exactly the ants are getting from all of this grazing remains unanswered. Laboratory feeding experiments with cultures of filamentous fungi did not show successful feeding, but yeasts suspended in water was accepted, and in the wild, ants have been observed eating dead insects, pieces of fruit, and even bits of fish offered on the foraging grounds. They are willing to consume a wide range of food if they encounter it, but they have specific adapted preferences. Now on to the explosions. When a Colobopsis explodens miner worker encounters a rival ant on a shared foraging trail, it does not just bite and retreat. It raises its gaster into a defensive posture, and if the encounter escalates, it blows itself up. The worker contracts the muscles of its abdomen with such force that the exoskeleton tears along the dorsal surface of the gaster. Internal pressure finishes the job, bursting a pair of enormous glands that run the length of the ant's body. These are the mandibular gland reservoirs. In most ants, these glands are tiny, producing alarm pheromones or digestive secretions. In Colobopsis explodens and its relatives, They have swollen into huge bladders that occupy much of the body cavity and are full of a bright yellow liquid. This yellow goo has been analyzed and revealed 45 different volatile compounds. Among them are alarm and defensive substances and a family of phenolics known as strong antimicrobials. The strange collection of chemicals raises a possibly strange purpose for the yellow goo. The goo only has a modest insecticidal effect on enemies. Against microorganisms, the compounds turn out to be strongly inhibitory. It's possible the exploding defense of Colobopsis explodens is not primarily a weapon against rival insects. It may be a chemical disinfectant, a way of keeping the colony's nest, trails, and bodies free of harmful microbes in the warm, wet, fungus-heavy environments of the rainforest. Every exploding worker leaves behind a smear of antimicrobials on the surface where it died, protecting its kin from the pathogens that would otherwise thrive in such a climate. Minor workers spend hours grazing on the microbial film of the tree bark, possibly removing microbes that could otherwise spread into the nest. The grazing behavior could be complementary to the chemical defense, a kind of physical housekeeping paired with a chemical one. To understand why self-sacrifice makes sense, it helps to remember what an ant worker actually is. Unlike humans, an ant worker generally cannot reproduce. She is genetically a close relative of the queen's and other workers in her colony, and her own reproductive future depends entirely on theirs. If she dies protecting the queen, her genes persist through her sisters. If she hoards her own life but the colony falls, everything is lost. This is known as kin selection, and it turns altruism into genetic strategy. Self-sacrifice is kin selection pushed to an extreme. A single worker is cheap from the colony's perspective. If her death saves dozens of sisters or repels a predator from the nest. Producing soldiers with distinctive weapons, stingers, jaws, or bursting glands, is a standard evolutionary move in social insects. Colobopsis explodens just happens to have taken that move to a dramatic conclusion. The evolutionary context helps explain another curious detail of the species. Its soldiers, the large major workers, do not explode. They stay inside, wedging their plug-shaped heads into nest entrances. Minors handle the dangerous outside world, becoming kamikazes when pressed. Majors guard the gates from within. The queen ants, once mature, grow wings, as do the males. On mating flights, they emerge from the nest to take to the air to find mates from other colonies, after which the newly fertilized queens shed their wings and attempt to establish colonies of their own. The ant nests have another surprise. They house a community of tiny crickets. These ant crickets are specialized insects that live inside ant colonies as guests or parasites. Their presence inside a Colobopsis explodens nest suggests that the colony supports its own small ecosystem. The ants may explode at intruders, but they apparently tolerate these particular roommates.